So I bought this lens last week because it really solved a lot of problems that I was having in my photography. So if you've been following me on my channel, you know that I do real estate photography professionally. And my workhorse has been this EM10 Mark II, of course, but the 7 to 14 millimeter f4 from Panasonic. And I've been using this lens for years now, and it's served me well, but it has a couple of issues that made me want to get this lens instead. So the first one is really a problem with the lens, and that is it has terrible purple fringing. I mean, purple flaring, I should say. And I've always had to work around it either by, adjusting the angle or my position, or using a giant umbrella to block the sun when I'm outdoors. I mean, I've worked around it because I got this lens at a pretty good deal. But for the most part, I've been okay with that, because the lens is very sharp. But this lens here, I took dozens of shots in direct sunlight, indoors and artificial lighting, and only one time when I was shooting directly straight at the sun, did I get any kind of flaring on this. It's pretty amazing that this is so flare resistant. Now I'm sure over time I'm going to run into it again and again, but I can tell you that with this lens here, and really with most fisheye lenses, it happens a lot because of this giant bulb in the front. Because I have about 3 other fisheye lenses, and they all have terrible flaring because of the sun in particular. The other thing this lens has is that it's an f1.8, so it's very, very fast. And this lens is an f4, and when I'm doing my professional work, it doesn't really matter. I'm shooting at f5.6 anyway. But because this is an f1.8, I can now use this lens for other things. In particular, I want to use this lens for astrophotography. That's something that I really can't do with this lens. I've tried, but being at f4, it's just too slow. It's a full 2 1/3 stops slower than the fisheye lens here. And in practical terms, what that means is I can take a shot in 15 seconds with this lens for my astrophotography. To get the same exposure with this lens at f4, I have to be at almost a full minute to get the same exposure, or I have to crank the ISO up to 6400 or higher. And by then, all of the colors and beauty of the sky are gone. That's why this lens has been sort of restricted to doing one thing, and that's my real estate photography. Now this lens, because it's a fisheye, you would think would exclude it from doing any kind of real estate photography or architectural photography, because your lines have to be straight. I mean, that's where the money is. If you can make straight lines in architectural photography, you'll make money. Trust me. And that's something that really held me back from getting fisheye lenses, except this one, because Olympus has programmed into the EM1 Mark II distortion correction or fisheye correction, so that you get a perfectly rectilinear image from this lens. It also, if you don't have the EM1 Mark II, you can do it in Olympus Workspace, and it's a free software that comes with your camera to correct the distortion of the fisheye. So that really makes this lens, or is going to allow me to replace my Panasonic lens permanently from my workflow and only use this lens, because this lens is, and being a pro lens, it has all of the attributes that Olympus has the reputation for in lenses. The excellent build quality, it's tack sharp, wide open, edge to edge, very little chromatic aberration or other weird lens anomalies. I mean, the lens, there's so many, I forget how many elements are in this thing, but this thing has some weight to it, but it's still relatively compact compared to other lenses. The other thing this lens does that surprised me a little bit was it has a very, very close focusing distance. I mean, I can get within an inch here of this lens here and get a picture, and I'll just show you real quick. All right, so now I'm about 2 inches away from the other lens here, and you can see no problem focusing. And if I move up, now I'm about 1 inch away, no problem focusing. Let me move up a little more. Still, no problem. It's amazing. Let's see how close I can get. Oh, right about there is the limit, it seems. So let me back up a little bit. Right there. The other thing this lens really, if you don't have a super wide angle yet, it really makes easy work of doing, say, 360-degree panoramic shots, where you can kind of touch the screen and scroll around and look up, down, all around in full 360 view. Because with this, and I'll put a link down below to an image I did. I'm trying out some 360 software, so there'll be a watermark there, but you can do a 360 pano in 4 shots with this lens, just front, back, left and right, and you're done. Really, there's a lot of reasons, or a lot of creative things you can do with this lens, and being such a high quality and so sharp, the images will not disappoint. So that being said, let me show you a couple of the images I've done this week with this lens since getting it. Now, this image here, this is like the very first image I took, or not the first, but one of the first images I took walking out of the camera store with this lens. And this was on my EM10 Mark II. It's very, very easy to correct using Olympus workspace, and as you can see in this picture. And then I just applied an art filter, and there you have it, a decent, for me, street photo, right? And this next photo is just, I went out to the park and applied a pinhole filter to it in workspace. And then, if you look at this picture with the boats here in the water, again, that fisheye lens kind of gives you that bowing effect of the tree line, and then along the bottom, and it really frames the boats in the center of the picture really nicely. So, and it's not something you can do easily with a rectilinear lens. Right? I think the fisheye really makes the picture here in this case. So, if you're the creative type, you'll find a lot of interesting ways to use this. This was just one that I just happened to come across. And the other benefit that I discovered, if you look at this image here, look at the 3 windows or 2.5 windows on the far right there, and then on the far left, you'll see 3 rows of windows or 3 floors there on the far left, and a little bit of the building there. That was taken with a distortion correction with the 8mm fisheye. Now I took the same picture, my camera's on a tripod, I took the same picture with the 7 to 14mm Panasonic lens. Look how much tighter that is, even though it's a 7mm versus the 8mm. We have lost that 1.5 windows. We lost the 3 balconies on the far left. So even with the distortion correction on the 8mm fisheye lens, this lens is still wider than the 7mm rectilinear lens from Panasonic. And I don't know if that's just because of this lens, but I'm getting effectively 6mm rectilinear lens with this fisheye lens. So that was a bonus I wasn't expecting, because normally when you do the fisheye correction, the lens gets a lot tighter. But this thing is still super wide, wider than 7mm Panasonic. And then finally, this is the image I'll put a link to where I did the 360 panorama, and just ignore the watermark. Like I said, I'm trying out this and PT GUI. The PT GUI does seem to be a superior software, but it's quite a bit more expensive. So I'm kind of on the fence between this Panorama Studio and PT GUI. If you have any comments about that or feedback, let me know down below, because like I said, I'm still kind of shopping Panorama software. So this last image of the flower here, again demonstrates how close you can get to the subject. I was less than an inch away on this flower, But I want you to look at also the background blur. The bokeh is very smooth and creamy. And because we're so close and because of the fisheye effect, it has sort of a swirliness to it as well. And this is something, if you're a very creative person, you can take advantage of in your photography. There's so many possibilities with this lens, and if you've been on the fence about this lens, I would just go for it. Just get it. I mean, I know it's a little pricey, but it's so worth it. This lens is a stellar lens. It's right up there with, say, their 300mm f4 Pro, which is probably going to be my next lens.